Okay, well this week we're going to start talking about Kantian ethics. This is a subject that if you've taken another philosophy course before, intro, or any ethics course before, you would already know something about. And there's a huge amount to say about it. Kant really did revolutionize ethics in many ways. Richard Rorty said that Immanuel Kant turned philosophy into a profession. Up to that time, there were people who devoted their lives to philosophy, but lots of people who are famous philosophers did primarily something else. Descartes was a tutor, Leibniz was a diplomat, Hume was a historian who wrote popular books on history, John Locke was a medical doctor, Spinoza was an eyeglass maker. And so it was really Kant who was maybe the first person who was prominent in that era, who really was a professional philosophy professor. Even though for most of his career he taught at the University of Königsberg as a private docent, which means he didn't really have an official position at the university, he taught private lessons. He did the equivalent of our informal classes in the union and served as a tutor until finally he became famous enough that they appointed him as a professor. It said that he never traveled more than 10 miles from the place of his birth. And he was someone of very regular habits. He took afternoon walks at 3 o'clock every day at Königsberg, and he said that people could set their clocks by his walking by the place. In any case, Kant was, despite the fact that the writing is difficult, I mean, Rorty's point was he turned it into a profession because after Kant, it takes a professional to understand what's going on. I mean, it's complicated, and the German is worse than the English. It's difficult. Though Hegel was then to do it one more and make it even worse. But still, Kant's kind of difficult. On the other hand, I think there are certain key ideas that are really crucial. And so, in the groundwork for the metaphysics of morals, he gives us several different versions of what he calls the categorical imperative, the one fundamental principle of morality. And we're going to start looking at the first two principles, two formulations of that today. Then we'll move on next time and look at the second. Then we'll look at the second major one. The first two are very similar. Then something called the formula of humanity. I suppose that's the third in this categorization. And then on Friday we'll look at the last two about autonomy and the kingdom of ends. I think all of them have interesting implications for organizational ethics, but they're somewhat different. He thinks they're all equivalent, and we'll see the arguments for why he thinks they're equivalent. But it's not obvious that they're equivalent. In fact, they seem to reflect different core ideas. And so he's saying, in a sense, that all those different core ideas really come down to the same thing and are tied together by something important in philosophy. But before we get into all that, let's start with a distinction that we saw in Aristotle. Remember, Aristotle distinguished intrinsic goods from instrumental goods. Now, there's a big overlap there. As we saw, lots of things can be both valued for their own sake and valued for the sake of something else. And so Aristotle puts lots of things in this middle category, lots of things in the instrumental category, argues that only one thing belongs in that always value for its own sake, never for the sake of something else category, happiness, or living well, eudaimonia. Kant starts the groundwork by saying, nothing in this world or even out of it can be conceived as good without qualification, except a good will. Now, lots of people think, aha, good without qualification, he means intrinsically good, good for its own sake. I think that's a mistake. That is not what he means. This is a new category. And so we need to introduce a third circle here. And think, all right, these are the things that are good without qualification. Now, everything else that's outside that circle is a qualified good. It's conditionally good. It's good if something else. If you have a certain desire, or if you value such and such, or if you're in a certain kind of circumstance. So let's think about some things that are instrumental goods. What are some common instrumental goods for Aristotle?
Currency.
Sorry?
Currency.
Okay, currency, money. Yeah, you could say money is like this, right? It's instrumentally good. Now, is it good without qualification? Is it, here I put it outside that circle. Is that right? Should I put it here? Are there circumstances where money is not a good thing? Does its goodness depend on something, or is it independent of something, of anything? Yeah?
I think intrinsically money has to be instrumental since money is useless without some sort of backing. Currency is based off of either fiat, faith, or, and more traditional money is gold or silver.
Okay, good. Yeah, money can end up being worthless, right? I mean, whether a paper currency, it's obvious, you're absolutely right, it has to be backed up by something, people have to believe in it. After all, you give me something of real value, and I give you this piece of paper. Well, that's kind of amazing, right? I can't just say, hey, will you give me that car? I'll give you this page of the fundamental principles of the metaphysics of morals. That doesn't work. There's something very special about that currency, and it depends on a whole system of people believing in it, accepting it as a sort of store of value. And if that belief goes away for some reason, you're in big trouble. That can happen in a country where the banking system fails, where the currency is hyperinflated and becomes worthless, and so on. And so, in fact, in Venezuela right now, the inflation rate is said to be something like over 1,000,000% a year, and the currency is essentially worthless. In Germany in 1923 that happened. People were lighting their stoves, heating their houses with currency because it was worthless. The streets were covered with it because it wasn't worth bending down to pick it up. And so that sort of thing can occur. It really is good under certain circumstances, but not under others. Even things like silver and gold, they're valued because they're rare. But what if we stopped doing that? Like, yeah, what are they good for? And we started doing something else. Like, suppose people thought, yeah, gold jewelry, that's so, I don't know, 20th century and stuff. From now on, you go to one of those arcades and you get a little plastic ring, right? And you gotta, I mean, it's tough, man. Those games are hard, but gotta put in lots of quarters and finally you get them. Well, anyway, you get the idea. That really depends on a certain social practice, too. So it seems like, yes, it's like this. Now, actually, isn't it true that all things that are instrumentally good are qualified good? After all, they're good as instruments, right? They're good for the sake of something else. At any rate, all these that are not intrinsically good seem that way. Because if I end up thinking, wait a minute, this thing is good because it gets me that. If I don't want that, if I'm not in a circumstance where that end is useful, then this thing being means to it doesn't help me. So, right now, I'm in a classroom. Somebody comes in with something helpful. They hand me a hammer. They said, here you go. Is that of value to me at the moment? I mean, despite Nietzsche's words that he was going to philosophize with a hammer, it seems to be not very useful, right, in this context. It doesn't help. Similarly, philosophers are useless in most contexts. And so you might think, yeah, wait a minute, anything that's really like this has to be a qualified good. So this category of goods doesn't have anything in it, right? There's nothing that is purely instrumentally good, not valued for its own sake, and yet good without qualification. These are means to ends, and if you don't value the end, the means isn't of any particular value. Unless, of course, it has value for its own sake. It's intrinsically good. So let's think about those. What are some examples of things that are intrinsic goods for Aristotle?
Happiness.
Happiness, okay? Now happiness, he says, is one thing that is intrinsically good and never valued for the sake of something else. So, happiness goes over here. Well now, haha. I put it there again, outside this category. And at first glance you might think that's surprising. Surely happiness is good without qualification. Isn't happiness the sort of thing we value for its own sake? And so wouldn't it be good no matter what? This is kind of what this means. Good without qualification. Good, in other words, no matter what. No matter what you want, no matter what your circumstances are, good no matter what. What are some things that are in this category?
A goodwill.
Getting ahead of us. But actually, I pointed this one. Intrinsically good, but not good without qualification, according to Aristotle. Things that are intrinsically good and instrumentally good, that we value both for their own sake and for the sake of other things. Yeah?
Maybe music?
Okay, good. Music. You might value music because it makes you money on the weekends. You might also value it for its own sake. Yeah.
Health.
Health. Health helps you do all sorts of other things, but it's also good for its own sake. Other things like that.
And education?
Okay, education, knowledge is useful for its own sake, but also useful for what it can do for you. In fact, Aristotle says virtue is like that. Well, Kant thinks all of those things do belong outside his circle, as I've drawn them. And that seems surprising. But here's his argument. He begins this way. Intelligence, wit, judgment, and the other talents of the mind, however they may be named. He's talking about what Aristotle referred to as intellectual virtues. And he's going to argue that they do belong here, these intellectual virtues. They are not good without qualification. Now, can you think of a circumstance where intelligence is not a good thing?
Evil genius.
Say it again?
Evil genius.
Ooh, good. An evil genius. Okay? Is the intelligence of the evil genius a good thing? No, right? You want Dr. Evil to be stupid. You don't want him to be smart. His intelligence is not a good thing. Other circumstances where intelligence might not be good. Yeah?
Like flash for Algernon, like you become super smart and everything like is written.
Oh, yes, okay, you become so intelligent that you become dysfunctional in some way. That seems possible. Now, what about wit? Is being witty always a good thing? No, right? For one thing, it might be a vicious wit. You might use your wit to make fun of other people and hurt them. But for another thing, there are circumstances where being funny is not good. I don't know. Like when?
Funerals?
Funerals. Yeah. Yeah, there's that line from the song. I'm the kind of guy who laughs at a funeral. Actually, I have laughed at a lot of funerals. I guess I'm that kind of guy. That's bad. But anyway, judgment. Ooh, now that's a tricky one. What Aristotle would have called practical wisdom. Good judgment. Isn't good judgment good without qualification, no matter what? When could it be bad to have good judgment? Yeah.
I forget the name of the guy who solved Fermat's last theorem, but his bad judgment wouldn't tell him that, let's not do this. There's like 1,000 math geniuses working on this. I might as well just, cook dinner or something.
Oh, okay, good. So sometimes entirely reasonable judgments turn out to be wrong, discouraging the one person who actually ends up solving the problem, for example. And that can happen. A lot of people get discouraged. They think, yeah, maybe I'll do this, but the odds are so much against them. People with good judgment seemingly say, oh, don't bother. The odds of your succeeding are so low. But in the end, they do. Yeah.
I was going to say, like a similar case, maybe your good judgment is to not go into a burning building and save the people inside.
Ooh, good. So maybe good judgment in some cases is going to actually prevent you from attaining the highest rank of virtue. After all, as Socrates mentions, the most courageous person is the one who seems to be exercising kind of bad judgment in a way in actually confronting overwhelming odds and risking huge dangers for very uncertain payoff. But also we can go back to that Dr. Evil case. Is if Dr. Evil has excellent judgment, he's very practically wise, is that a good thing? No, right? You want him to have bad judgment. And so that's not a good thing. What about moral virtues? Things like courage, Kant says, resolution, perseverance, the qualities of temperament. He says all of these things are undoubtedly good and desirable in many respects. But these gifts of nature may also become extremely bad and mischievous. By the way, notice he calls them gifts of nature. As if good judgment and courage just fall out of the sky. You're just like born. Like, whoa, look at that brave baby. I mean, Aristotle would think, wait a minute, you gotta work hard to develop these virtues. It's not like, hey, thank you, nature, you just may be highly courageous or have excellent judgment. But anyway, may become extremely bad and mischievous if the will that's to make use of them, and which is called character, is not good. So in short, the Dr. Evil sort of case where look, a bad person is highly intelligent. A bad person is highly courageous, is perseverant. That's bad, right? Suppose you have an enemy, and this enemy is obsessed with you, and they are out to destroy you. They hate you for irrational reasons of their own, and they're out to get you. Well, is it a good thing if this nemesis is highly intelligent? Do you want them to be smart? Do you want them to be courageous, to persevere in getting you no matter what? No, right? You want them to be kind of dumb, have bad judgment. You want them to be cowardly, and to just give up the first time you survive, and so on. So, in short, those aren't good in those circumstances. Now, he said, the same is true with the gifts of fortune, power, riches, honor, even health. So all of, well, this, but also a bunch of those things, well, yeah, because there are circumstances where they're not good either. So before we move on, let's think about circumstances where, let's say, health is not good. When could health be a bad thing? Yeah.
You live too long and you get bored.
Ooh, you live too long and you get bored. Okay, might be that, right? I mean, you're just like, just another beautiful day in paradise. I don't know, maybe that. What else? I mean,
Could be over-focused on health, like people that exercise too often or are really conscious about their diet and don't get enough carbs or things like that.
okay, yeah, you could be too obsessed with this maybe and place a greater value on it than you really ought to in balance with other things. How about education, knowledge? Is it something that could be bad? Well, again, go ahead.
You have nuclear physicists who are, Islamist radicals who are helping Pakistan or the Taliban trying to acquire these weapons.
Ah, good. So you could have this, again, coupled with a will that is not good. And even if the will is good, you might think, actually, there are certain kinds of knowledge that might open a Pandora's box and cause great trouble. Even if it doesn't start out with a bad will, but the bad will is the easy case to understand. It fits right in with what Kant is saying. Actually, the Boston Globe has an article this morning about these DNA tests and the problems they cause. People think, 23andMe or Ancestry.com, oh, cool, just swab your cheek and send it off and find out whether you're part Hispanic or whatever. And then you get back these results. And sometimes it means like, that's not my dad. Or, I have some sister I've never heard about, right? And it's like, whoa. Okay, not to mention the fact that you might find out, oh my gosh, I have this serious disease, I'm going to be dead by 45 or something. So anyway, there's some serious things that can happen as a result of this. One woman who's quoted in the article says, it's as if my whole family died on the same day because I realized they're not my family. Some people are adopted and they never know, and they're adults and they find out. It's like, anyway, so those things can be bad too. In any event, yes, all of these things, he says, can be problems. Now, what about happiness itself? Isn't happiness always a good thing? When could happiness be a bad thing? Yeah.
I suppose there's some that would argue that happiness is worthless if you don't have sadness to compare it to or contrast it with.
Ah, right. Some people think, look, if we didn't have ups and downs, we couldn't properly value the good parts. You wouldn't appreciate happiness unless you would appreciate sadness and so forth. I never know what to think about those arguments. I tend to think, I don't know. I like being happy. I think I'd like it just about as well. I've never been miserable. But, maybe there's something to that. Yeah.
Could you say happiness is bad, like if it comes from something bad? Like if it comes from you doing something bad?
Good, exactly. You pull off the perfect crime. Right? Think about who were the Chicago guys? The college kids at the University of Chicago who decided to commit the perfect murder.
Loeb and...
Yes, Leopold and Loeb. Okay, they decide to kill the... In fact, there's a Hitchcock movie, Rope, that is sort of modeled on this case. Where these guys, just for fun, really, just to see if they can do it, plot this murder and kill their cousin. And it turns out they're caught. Very improbably. I mean, they think they've committed the perfect crime. They've disposed of the murder weapon in a place that'll never be found. They throw the weapon from the train as they're going over the lake. It's all found. I mean, it's really an amazing story. But in any case, they do get caught. But you might think, look, suppose they had gotten away with it, and they're happy, like, yeah. So, what are you so happy about? I committed the perfect crime. I murdered this guy, nobody will ever know. Except I just told you about it, so now I have to kill you too, but I know how to do it now, no problem. You're like, wait, no, this is bad, right? I don't want you to be happy about that. And that's what Kant says. He says, look, the sight of a being who is not adorned with a single feature of a pure and good will, enjoying unbroken prosperity and happiness, in fact, can never give pleasure to an impartial, rational spectator. So that's an important test on its own. It becomes important in later ethics, this idea of an impartial, rational spectator. Would this gain the approval of somebody who didn't have any stake in this particular issue? But let's think about the general point here. Imagine a movie where there's a completely evil character. Totally evil. I mean, not one vestige of a pure and good will. And that person at the end gets away with it. Okay? Our anti-hero gets the girl, lives happily ever after, gets away with all the crimes. Do you think, yeah, that's awesome? No, I mean, you're something like the impartial, rational spectator as you're in the movie. And you're going to think, that's just terrible, okay? You're not going to be happy about that. Are you? I mean, maybe you are. Some of you are saying, I don't know, maybe. Actually, I've seen movies like this, and I hate them, so I'm on Kant's side here, but, some of these movies are considered great, so I don't know. Yeah?
Well, Paradise Lost is kind of like that, like Satan is kind of the anti-hero of the story, and the reader becomes sympathetic, or like Humbert and Lolita, you kind of become sympathetic to him, he's kind of this very evil character, but he kind of ends up being the hero of the story, and you end up kind of sympathizing with his cause.
Okay, good point. There is a German movie, M, that is about a guy who molests and murders children. And by the end of the movie, you kind of are pushed into seeing things from his point of view, and he becomes something of a sympathetic character. And it's a very disturbing thing, morally speaking, right? Because part of you is drawn in somehow to this, and you start identifying with it, sympathizing with this character. But then you think, but wait, this character's horrible. And so there's this tension that's set up by the art. Now, I think Kant's response would be, look, it could be great art, but in the end, it should make you feel that tension. If that person gets away in the end, and you just say, yeah, I got no problem with that, it's all good, then you must not be an impartial, rational spectator. There's something wrong with you. So he says, a good will appears appears to constitute the indispensable condition of even being worthy of happiness. So in short, he's ending up saying, yeah, there is something that might be good without qualification and have intrinsic value. That is a good will. And he thinks nothing else is really like this. This is the only thing. Now, if we're going to put a good will in this category, and I can see some of you scowling, so you might think, wait, has he given us any argument for that? He's argued that all these things don't belong. He hasn't really argued that a good will does. And even if it does, we don't know which side of this line to put it on. Presumably, a good will is good for its own sake, right? It's not just good instrumentally for something else. It's like, hey, so what is a good will good for? Pleasing impartial, rational spectators. No, it's always got to be good for its own sake. So this has nothing to do. But which side does it go on there? If it should go in those things, and notice he hasn't really given us an argument for that. Also, he hasn't given us an argument that it's the only thing. So, first of all, before even addressing the deeper questions, what side of that would we put it on? Is having a good will good for its own sake, or is it an instrumental good, or both? Yeah.
The examples illustrated so far clearly seem instrumental, in that we care that the person who murdered someone is feeling happy because he led to further unhappiness, or that happiness led to a deterioration of greater well-being that could have been. So all these cases of goodwill or intention seem to rely upon their consequence on the well-being of conscious creatures.
So he has seemingly given us examples, well, not exactly concrete examples, but he will give us examples later, where yes, it seems like having a good will actually pays off in a lot of ways. Honesty is the best policy, a good example of this. You know, if you want to do the right thing, then it seems like that does produce some benefits for you, so it can be good instrumentally. Yeah, you wanted to say something.
I was just gonna say that goodwill sounds like it stems off of like free will in general, which is
It is going to depend on free will.
right. So, and that would be internal, like that would be self-focused. So if you were like choosing to have a goodwill of your options in free will, then that still seems like selfish or like self-centered or for your own reasons to me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, suppose somebody says, yeah, here's why you should have goodwill. You'll be able to sleep at night. Okay? You'll be much happier with yourself. Eventually, the person who is the criminal mastermind, Dr. Evil, starts feeling guilty. It starts catching up to him. Or maybe you just say, look, there are lots of benefits for you. And in fact, maybe even you think, I want to be a good person, and you have selfish motivations for doing it. I want to be a good person so I can get into heaven. Or I want to be a good person so other people will like me. Or I want to be a good person so that my wife isn't always mad at me. Or whatever it is, right? You've got this thing where you think, I think all that's plausible. Now, Kant is concerned to say, look, it isn't just instrumentally valuable. Of course, I mean, it's not over here. But it does, I think, pay off for you in various ways. That's not, in the end, the argument for it. In fact, he's going to say it shines like a jewel, regardless of the consequences of having it. It's valuable even for its own sake, even if there were no benefits to it. So he thinks it definitely is of value for its own sake, but I see no reason to deny that it would be valued for the sake of something else. And so maybe it really belongs here, though I feel a little uncertain about that. Now, is there, first of all, are we right to put it in either category? That's one of our deeper questions. Secondly, is it the only thing that belongs, as he claims? He really gives us no argument for either one, really. So let's think about the first. Does it belong there at all? Well, we've been trying these tricks of thinking, are there any circumstances where that is bad? Is it ever bad to be happy? Answer is yes, if you're happy for a bad reason, basically because you're an evil person succeeding or something. Are these things ever bad? Yes. Could a goodwill ever be bad?
Road to hell is paved with good intentions.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Think about that for a moment. You could say, wait a minute, aren't there circumstances where actually having a goodwill is a bad thing? Now, interestingly, it doesn't necessarily make us think worse of the person, but it might lead to all sorts of disasters. So what's a circumstance in which that might happen, where good intentions lead you to hell, or if not to hell, at least to disaster of some kind? Yeah.
You think you're bombing a Somali terror network, but you instead end up killing or bombing a pharmaceutical company that is supplying essential medication to the entire country.
Oh, that would never happen. No, exactly. You're trying to do something that seems like a legitimate thing to do in wartime, right? You have good intentions. You are fighting, let's just assume, in a just war against an enemy that really should be defeated. You think that this is something that is a justifiable action in terms of that war, and it turns out you're making a horrible mistake, right? So what if somebody says, wait a minute, all right, just as happiness might not be a good thing unless it's coupled with a goodwill, unless it's coupled with good judgment, unless it's coupled with enough knowledge, unless it's coupled with other things, is also going to be bad. Think, for that matter, about medicine before about 1850. It was almost always bad for the people who were treated by doctors. I mean, maybe not in cases of broken bones that were splintered or whatever, but so often it was. Why? It's not because doctors were wicked. It's like, hey, you're sick. Let me help you. It wasn't like that, right? They thought they were doing a good thing. Oh, yes, you got too many bad humors in the blood. Let's take some of that blood out. That was a really terrible idea. But people did that for centuries. And So you might say, yeah, wait a minute, if I don't have adequate knowledge, if I don't have adequate wisdom, then maybe a good will is going to lead me to do all sorts of terrible things. Yeah.
I think that Kant isn't concerned though with outcomes, right? So he's not concerned with what it's going to lead to. So I think his definition of good isn't going to be based on the end result of what you're doing. So he's saying it's good not because of what it causes, but because of the duty that it stems from. So I think the definition of good for what we're using, what he's using to the things.
Right, okay, good. Yes, so if we think about, and Kant does give us here a model of moral decision, really a decision making in general. And I think it's worth sketching out this model because your point is exactly right. In the end, he says, look, I'm not concerned about the good or badness of the consequences. That's not my point. When we look at Dr. Evil succeeding in his wicked plot of being happy, we are unhappy about that. And we judge that that is not a good thing. But why? Because of its consequences? Because of what he's going to do? Not really. Suppose Dr. Evil is trying to develop this horrible destructive technology to destroy the planet in order to take everybody, in effect, for a huge ransom. And he ends up developing this technology and he's jubilant about it. He says, yes, finally. Well, it turns out as a weapon it doesn't work because people refuse to pay the ransom. They send James Bond in, mixing my movie themes here. Bond fails, he detonates the weapon, and it doesn't work. In fact, it brings all sorts of benefits to humanity. It cures global warming. It kills most of the world's mosquitoes. It eliminates several diseases. We say, whoa, good consequences. So what do? We say, well, yay, Dr. Evil. We don't morally approve of his happiness, even though in the end the consequences were good. So Kant's concerned to say, look, it isn't about the consequences. Let's think about the pattern of a typical action. You are going to be in a certain state of mind. You will have, actually, let's focus on two things, the subjective side of things and the objective side. Starting with the subjective side, you're going to have what he refers to as a spring. A spring of desire, basically. There are going to be certain sources in the self that lead to one or more desires that are relevant to this action. So maybe this spring is something like a need for food. And then it leads to a desire to eat lunch, something like that. Well, objectively, similarly, there can be a law. And the law is going to give you certain reasons for action, certain motives, which he classifies as being actually on the objective side of things. And actually, I don't know if I want to put that there. No, I don't. Sorry. It's sort of hard to, he says all this in just a few words. And so it's hard to know exactly how to construct this model. But basically, we enter a process of deliberation. And we do it on the basis of, well, the reasons. Let's do it this way. Giving us certain motives for action. And the desire giving us certain inclinations to act. And then, on the basis of that deliberation, we reach a decision. Then we act. Then, that act, well, there are certain, you might say, anticipated effects. The effects we think the action is going to have in advance. But then, we have objectively its real effects. Now, all of this, Kant thinks, is a very useful way of thinking on things. It's also very useful in terms of categorizing various kinds of theories. So, here is one kind of ethical theory. It says, actually, we judge everything. We judge actions, but we also judge decisions, processes of deliberation, methods of deciding. We judge motives, we judge inclinations, We judge intentions, which is maybe how I should label this arrow. We judge reasons and desires and so on, all of that on the basis of the ultimate consequences. So we might say, yeah, if we're making moral evaluations, this is what matters. Okay? And it's all that matters. That makes you, in philosophical terms, a consequentialist. In the end, that's what matters. Okay? The effects. Now, it's not as if the rest is morally irrelevant. Like motives, who cares? It's just, what is a good motive? Well, it's one that leads to good decisions, which leads to good actions. That means ones that produce good effects. And we might, in giving you advice about decisions, focus on the real effects or the anticipated effects. We'll come back to that when we talk about consequentialism. But Kant is not a consequentialist. He definitely does not think that's where moral value lies. Well, if you're not of that type, if you think it's not all just a matter of where it all ends up, then you are a deontologist. A deontologist thinks that something that happens before makes a real moral difference that isn't reducible to effects. Now, it might be that you think, look, it's just a matter of certain actions themselves being intrinsically wrong. Okay, maybe murder. You say, I don't care what the effect of the thing is. I mean, yes, kill somebody, that's bad. But an act of murder is wrong, even if that person killed is terrible, and even if their death actually benefits humanity as a whole. There's something wrong with it anyway. You might think, well, decisions matter. There are certain moral ways of making decisions, certain immoral ways. You might think it's a matter of motives. Certain motives are evil motives intrinsically, or that some inclinations are just bad intrinsically. You might think certain desires are intrinsically bad. Certain reasons are unacceptable reasons, etc. So the deontologists, now they can still say effects matter somewhat, but they in the end have to say, but they're not the only thing that matters, ultimately. Well, Kant is an extreme deontologist. He actually says the effects don't matter at all. Okay? What matters, morally speaking, is not the effect of your action. It's something else. In other words, yeah, sometimes it leads to disaster. That doesn't affect the moral quality of the act. You thought you were doing the right thing. We look at those doctors before 1750 who bled patients, and actually many of them continued to do it way after they showed them have known better. We look at those doctors and we say, you know, were they bad people? Were they doing evil things? No, they were doing the wrong thing. But that doesn't mean it was morally bad. It just turned out to be unfortunate in its effects. And similarly, if the bombing took place in the context of a just war, even if it went to the wrong target, you might think, we don't judge it as morally evil. We nevertheless think it was a horrible tragedy and a mistake, but that's different from judging it as an immoral action. Now, I think this is all tricky, because one way of responding is to say, there's the judgment of the person and the judgment of the action. Maybe it was an immoral action committed by someone who was not immoral, but just did it by mistake. That would be one response. In which case, you'd say, Kant's sort of right when we judge people, not right when we judge actions. You might think, wait a minute, if you're going to bomb something, you better know what it is. And so, say there is a moral failing here. You might think, look, actually, I can't even judge the action as, I mean, it's bad, it was the wrong thing to do, but is the wrongness there the wrong of immorality, or is it the wrong of a mistake? In any case, I think it's hard to settle that question. But if we think about what Kant is doing, he's saying, in the end, moral value depends on now. Well, what exactly? Think about desires. What kind of good do they give rise to? Okay? You have a desire, and then you decide to do something. Why? Because it gets you what you want. In short, all of this, he says, gives us a conception of good things and obligations and so on that are all qualified. Things that you decide to do, you do because you desire it. And so those are all, this is a model that operates well in general, and it makes sense of things that are means to ends that are valued because you desire them, because there's a relevant spring of action, because you're inclined to them, etc. All that keeps you in this part of the life. So, what could give you something that was more objective, that was actually good without qualification, not just good if you have a certain kind of desire or inclination? Well, it would have to be something purely up here. So, I think he's going to say all of this subjective side, if we're thinking about the moral question, we can, for the moment, ignore that. Now, it's going to create problems for us in various ways, but let's put it aside for now. Anything that is really good without qualification must be coming from this top level. What could that be like? Yeah.
I don't understand how the reasons we do things, even from an objective level, aren't parceled into the anticipated effects. Like it seems, even then, it seems like a consequentialist way to think about actions.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, you're right. In every particular case, you think, I want to do something. Let's say it's a paradigm case for moral action. I want to help that person. They need help. I'm going to help. Okay, and it seems like a morally praiseworthy thing to do. And now, rule out my desires. It's not like, ooh, I want these people around to think I'm a nice person. I don't want to, you're not doing it for any self-interested reason. It's not because of any particular desire on your part or anything down here. You think, no, I should do it. I should help people in need. Well, you might say still, I've got the anticipated effect in mind, that this will help them, right? I think that, let's say the person has fallen down and can't get up on their own, that my helping them up is going to benefit them. I anticipate a certain effect from them, and it's based on that anticipated effect. Now that seems right, and I think Kant says yes. But nevertheless, he thinks there is something, so you might say, look, this never operates purely and gives us anything concrete all by itself. If there is no spring of action, if there is no desire, no inclination, why would I do anything at all? So he says basically all of the substance, all of the material aspects of things are going to come from this subjective side. But does that mean we can get nothing at all from this alone? He says no, but it's purely formal. The actual substance of an obligation or of a moral action is going to come from, yes, anticipating certain effects, thinking about reasons as well as desires and inclinations, and contemplating what I'm going to try to do by doing this. But nevertheless, he says there's something in abstraction from all of that we learn. Now, what is it? This is in a way the trickiest part of the whole argument, because he says if I rule all that out, and I think, okay, I'm going to try to act in a way that is good without qualification, but independent of any anticipated effect, independent of any desire, then there's no substance to it. And indeed, Hegel says, yeah, this theory has no substance. There's no content to Kant's theory. But he doesn't think so. He says there is one thing I realize, which is that I must act from the law itself. Okay, I must act from duty. Now that's a pure form, because so far we don't know what the law is. We don't know what duty is. But he says, well, I can tell you something about this law. I can't tell you anything that's detailed yet, like do not murder, do not kill, do not steal, etc., etc. But I can tell you this. You must conform your actions to a law. And what is a law? It's something universal, he says, that serves as a rule. So, I must act on the basis of universal considerations. And that, he says, is the point. It is based on the universality of the law. So I think, the law is something that by definition applies to everybody. So I have to conform to that. What does that mean about my action? I must act in a way that accords with universal law. I have to be willing to universalize my action. Next time we'll look at the categorical imperative which says that outright, and then we'll try to develop out of that the formula of humanity, which gives us a concrete meaning for applying.